OK and the podcast serves as a vessel to bridge the gap between human isolation and connection. We are all going through something. However, what happens when we start sharing our stories? We will be able to connect, heal, and grow. Come with me and my guests on a journey that will uncover their OK and moment. I'm your host, Just Jess. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are listening to this podcast. I'm your host, Just Jess. Welcome to OK and the podcast, where we are bridging the gap between human isolation and connection. And I am really excited because we have somebody on the line now that is my sister from another mister. We've had a lot of adventures together, a lot of different growth in our, in our careers, personal, professional, whatever. And she's been a constant. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yo, and hello, everybody. I am Brie Dally, Brie like the cheese and Dally like dilly dally. Should I go into the whole spiel that I used to do for all of my sales production classes?
Do it. Yeah.
No, yeah, I've known Jess for I don't even know how long it's been. It's like since about a year into me being a trainer, maybe a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it would have been back in like 2015.
15. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a fun journey. We both worked at am I allowed to say company names on here? I guess I should ask that.
Say X company.
X company. It had a big yellow tag. We both worked there for many years, and then Jess had the opportunity to move on. And then we all actually had the opportunity to move on.
Yes,
some of us forcibly. And we all ended up kind of going our separate ways, and it's really interesting because like both of us have lived across the country from one another for the last many years, and now we actually both live on the West Coast again.
Same time zone.
Yes, same time zone. Finally. But yeah, it's been a few years. I'm like, I don't know what else to introduce. I'm a learning and development professional. I am not professional.
On all things. So you mentioned us living across the country and just, I think, staying in contact. And it didn't matter what state, it didn't matter what time zone. I remember in 2020 where I was going to New York for my anniversary and you were like, bitch, I'll see you there. And I was like, okay. Yep. And Brie from Boston, took the train up, across, down.
Across and down
to New York. And we were in Times Square at this dumpling. It was a dumpling spot that we found.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was so good.
We sat there for hours. Eating, drinking, and then it was just a time. And in fact, to share, we share our personal lives with us, and just having that mesh, and then going into Central Park with the
the cherry blossoms.
Yeah. So those pictures were epic, and I'm just like, anywhere in the world, I know Brie will find me, and I'll find Brie. So
if Brie wants to go there, she'll figure out a way to go.
Right. We're don't worry about that. No big deal. So I want to start with just overall, how are you?
I am good. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. So I currently have the vid. Dearest sister Rona has arrived at my doorstep. This time around, so this is my second time having COVID. It's not nearly as bad, but would you like me to tell the story of how I got it?
Girl, because it's one of those moments where I'm like, you just have to know the story, because then you appreciate it even more on the back end. Go ahead. Yeah.
I will start with the first time I got COVID, because It was Labor Day last year. So we're currently recording this like Labor Day weekend.
Yep.
It was Labor Day last year. And I had gotten like I was getting a little squirrely and I was like, I need to go out and do something. So I decided that I was gonna go to karaoke. I've been to karaoke at this bar a couple different times. They only do it on Saturday nights.
Okay.
So I went to I'm actually not going to say the name of the bar because of circumstances.
Oh.
But it's a great bar. It's such a good bar. It's like an Irish pub. It's down by Pike Place.
Mhm.
It's so fun, especially once like people start crowding in there and they're dancing and they're loving it. Like it's so great, and the
Good
bartenders are
vibes.
phenomenal. One of the bartenders actually every time they do karaoke, he does gin and juice and he like walks around the entire bar. It is like he is a performer.
Oh, it's an
He
act.
fucking
Okay.
does
Okay.
it. I also don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but
You can,
oops.
you can. You're totally
But
fine.
be ready. But so yeah, so I went there last Labor Day weekend. I had a really great time. Came home a couple of days later. I started getting that little tickle in the back of my throat, and I was like, oh no, because for the 2 years during this whole freaking pandemic, I had not caught it. I was getting vaccinated. I would
You
like
ready?
every
Yeah.
shot that I could get, I was getting. I got mad at a pharmacy because like I was a week early to get it like for approvals for vaccines for like my age group or whatever.
Got it. Got
And they
it.
were like, no, we're not giving it to you. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like I got mad. I almost had a Karen moment.
Oh
Um,
shit.
but so I ended up getting COVID and it was bad. Like it was, I got the fever and the body aches. Like my poor dog, like I think no one warns you that having a dog means being sick is that much harder
Yeah.
because like it's like you have to like carve yourself out of the puddle that you have made on the couch, and you have to like double masked so that like no one in your apartment building gets the horrible virus that you have. And then like you have to take your dog around, and she's so friendly, she's so lovely, but every time she tries to say hello to a stranger, I'm just like, I have COVID, please go away.
He's
I'm like,
like,
please don't get
okay,
sick.
we're
Don't
on a
touch my
walk,
dog, she
but
might be like carrying virus spores, I don't know. I am not a doctor, but
the prep workers will, or the
oh
the
my
prep
gosh.
workers will. That's
Yeah.
one thing that I do remember about COVID. It's like you have to, obviously we know the precautions, we know all the things that we're supposed to do, but then trying to exist in
Yes.
society and then making sure like you're watching your surroundings. But when you do have animals, they need to go out, they need to get their walks in and all of that, especially when you
Yeah.
have friendly animals. There people are going to come up to them like, oh my gosh, your dog is so amazing. Back up if you want, just
Yep.
back up, okay.
Like,
Back it
please
all the
don't.
way up.
I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to save you.
Just trying to protect you. That's it. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the last time. I actually did not go back to that bar until like many months down the line. And I was like, when I went in there, I actually told one of them that I had got COVID there. And they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I felt bad for telling them because they looked super guilty. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I got
Oh,
over
they
it.
just
At the
brushed it off.
time I was a smoker. So like that was my main concern, was like, will my lungs survive?
Got it.
I
Mhm.
had lost my sense of smell, like all of that stuff. So I went to karaoke at the same bar
Mhm.
last Saturday. And I like knowing my history with the bar, I was like, I'm gonna sit inside for a little bit. I'm gonna make friends with this new karaoke DJ because it was his first night and he was panicked.
Oh.
And then I was like, I'm just gonna go sit outside. I'm gonna hang out with the bouncer because he's freaking cool. We're having good conversation.
Mhm.
And eventually, like the cook, the chef from the, the kitchen came out and sat with us. And like we were having a great time. And then Monday night rolls around and I start getting the itch in the back of my throat. And I was like, no. So yeah, so I had gotten COVID again, but I just started a new job. Literally, it was my second week on the job.
This is
And we get to
crazy.
pick 1 week or 1 day a week that we work from home. So I had worked from home on Monday.
Okay. Oh, so it's
Um,
hybrid. It's
and
hybrid.
it's kind of hybrid. It's supposed to be mostly in office, but my team specifically, like they wanted to try to keep more of a hybrid
Yeah.
opportunity for people just because not everybody lives up north a little bit. It's like 30 minutes north of Seattle.
Okay. Okay.
Um, But yeah, so I mean, it's a great work environment. I have my own office, like it's great.
Nice,
But
nice.
um yeah, I went in, I like because it's my second week of this job, I am meeting with new people all over the place. I was in a meeting with six other people, and I'm sitting there like it's just allergies. It's just allergies. Like I slept with the window open because
Lee.
it's been so hot. Like it's just allergies. It's not a big deal. I got home, I woke up the next morning and my lungs were on fire. And I was like, this is not just allergies. So I stayed home that day. I tested again for COVID because I had tested the night before. I tested again and it was finally positive. And I was like, God. So then you have to do all the contract tracing and you have to like tell people, hey, by the way, if you talked to me in
Oh
an
my God.
enclosed space for more than 15 minutes, you might have COVID.
Just
So
FYI.
my boss is actually, I keep asking her, I'm like, are you feeling okay? Do I need to feel guilty about this?
Yikes.
Yeah. So
What
that's I got COVID twice from the same bar singing karaoke
during Labor Day?
during Labor Day at the
That's
exact same time of the year.
that's well,
Crazy.
guess what? Tradition. There you go. So
I want this tradition.
there you go. Just put on the
I'm
tradition
like,
bucket.
my company's actually holding a wellness, like they're doing wellness clinics
Yeah.
the next 2 Tuesdays. I'm obviously gonna miss this one, but the next one they do flu shots and stuff. And I'm like, shoot me up, man. I need all the vaccines.
All the things.
Please give them to me.
Well, I know that you are doing everything to take care of yourself. So I'm sending you positive energy and light and love, all the things. Because it doesn't help with, all the fires up north and everything like that. So
Oh
that's
my gosh,
one, one factor. Then you got the strand that had all the things, another factor. So take care of you. Um,
doing my
which is cool.
best.
Yeah, I know, and I know you're doing a fantastic job. So I want to switch gears and I want to think about, some of the journey that you've been on as far as outside of work, but just your overall creativity. I mean, Bree, you're one of the most creative people that I've ever met and seen do things where things will pop in your brain and then all of a sudden it's on Instagram and you are having a whole novel of just various stories, various ways that you're connecting the dots in your life. So bring us along on that journey. How did you get into to the things that you're into? And then like
Yeah,
how do you put that all together to share with the world?
I am gonna take us all the way back to I'm like regaining my my
Dots.
thoughts. Yeah. Woo. Um, I so my dad actually is a minister. And he like my entire childhood was just growing up in the church.
Yeah.
That was my identity for the first what like 13 years of my life. I someone posted a meme the other day that was like, I'm sorry for the things that I said when I was an evangelical teenager.
Ah,
That was me.
got
I
it.
was I was a horrible little shit. But
Damn, Brie.
um because like we're growing up in the Midwest and my
Mhm.
dad is an amazing minister. Like he does a really great job of like trying to keep it as biblical as possible and not trying to pull in like random political ideas.
Right.
And realistically, like when we were kids, that wasn't really a danger, you know? Like, I mean, it was, but it wasn't like as prevalent as it is now, I guess, or as toxic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
he's a really good minister. My mom is she is the typical like minister's wife. And when we lived in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
if you can just imagine any like southern blonde minister's wife with the big ass hair
Oh yeah. I
and
see.
the
Visual. Visual. Yep. Yep.
and she's
Mm-hmm.
got three daughters and a little boy and we all have matching clothes and like it was the epitome of like evangelicalism.
Got it. Got it.
And so yeah, so we actually this like my creativity kind of spawns I think mostly from my dad. My mom is creative in her own right. She does a lot of like little hobby projects.
Mhm.
But my dad was the first person in my family that I saw drawing. And he's big into comic books. Like he collects Marvel, DC comic books. He's more of a DC person, which we're not going to shame him for,
Interesting.
but
Interesting. Uh-huh. Okay.
his
Okay.
he loves Batman, and like he likes Wolverine, like that's his Marvel character.
Good character. Very good
But
character.
yeah, the I grew up basically around comic books without like really knowing that I was growing up around comic books. And it's really interesting, just kind of identifying some of those little pieces of art that came from my childhood.
Mhm.
But back when I was 13, we were at a church in Iowa who um at the time, I don't know, do you remember what book series was like mega popular when you were 13?
Babysitters Club.
Babysitter's Club,
Um,
definitely.
Harry Potter.
It was Harry
Um,
Potter.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I got into Harry Potter. I started reading, like really reading. I mean, I read Babysitter's Club, I read Sweet Valley High, I read
Yes.
Animorphs. Like I
Mhm.
was always into reading when I was a kid. And that like always got my imagination going. And so I started reading Harry Potter, and my dad actually took me out of school one day as a treat when the movie started coming out. He took me
Okay.
out of
Okay.
school and he took me to a matinee because again, he's a good minister, so we didn't make a lot of money, so a matinee was well priced.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Okay. Okay.
So yeah, so he takes me to Harry Potter. It was such a cool experience just to get to go to the movies. Like we got a bucket of popcorn. Like I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was
Oh,
so
I love
young.
this. Hmm.
And I like it was just this universe of magic and just possibility that I got super into. And of course, like my little creative brain, I was like, what if this was how the story went? And I started writing fan fiction because I also found that fan fiction was an
A
avenue
thing.
that you
Yep.
could go down. I was a huge nerd. It's fine. But so I just like I relished in this joy of creating things. Like I loved being able to write these dumb characters that had nothing to do with like the actual plot line of Harry Potter. Like it was a little 12/13-year-old's brain on like what could happen if I were a part of this world. And it's like,
That's
it's the
amazing.
fun stuff where you insert yourself into the story. And like as the books kept coming out, I was a mega fan. Like I was so excited. And I think the fourth book had just come out, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And I brought it to church with me. I was like, I'm going to read this
Oh.
in the spare time because this church that we had three different services. And as the minister's kid,
Oh,
you've
you're
got to
there.
be there
Yeah.
because your whole family's there. So,
Yeah.
like, in the middle of these services, I'm just going to read this book. Like, I'm not going to read it in the middle of church.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm going to read the Bible in church. No, so I had brought this book with me. Eventually it got brought up to the elders of the church, which for any listeners who are not familiar with church politics,
Mm.
elders are basically your board of directors, and they're the people who, if you piss off, like it's bad for you. So
Ooh, yeah.
yeah. So apparently I had pissed them off, and I did that a lot because I was also as a child I was a little I acted out frequently. In fact, so I actually have a friend now who is like, I'm pretty sure that like every woman has ADHD in some form, but like we were never diagnosed because it was the boys. It was
Oh,
like the boys thing.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, I definitely had ADHD because like I had to like draw to pay attention in class. Like that was how I actually intook information, was if I was doing something with my hands. And I would act out frequently. I remember throwing rocks in the church parking lot just because I wanted to see what noise they would make as they hit cars. I broke someone's windshield
Uh-oh.
when I was like 6 because I just wanted to see what would happen. Like I
It's
don't yeah.
called exploring and experiments.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. Okay, at a young age. All right. All right.
So yeah, so I was never like the number one golden child at like of the four that my parents had.
Mm,
My sisters referred to me as Bratney for many years because my full name is Brittany. Um
Bratney.
yep. I intended to test boundaries and boy did I.
Mm,
But
mm.
Yeah, I around that time too, there was some other stuff kind of going on at the church that as like a 13-year-old, I didn't really understand what it
Sure.
was. But there was a lot of political drama. Apparently my dad was getting rave reviews from the congregation, but there were he was an associate pastor. There was
Okay.
like a regular pastor, and then there was a youth pastor, and the youth pastor wanted to be the associate pastor. Um and so they like it felt like, I can't confirm this because again I don't know all the facts that happened with that, but it felt like there was this weird conspiracy to try to get my dad out of the church. And
Okay.
so my stuff with Harry Potter and him pulling me out of school to go see the movie, all of that got brought up, along with some, like, my dad was holding auditions for the praise team,
Hmm.
so that they could make sure that they knew who was interested in the praise team. It wasn't like someone was going to be told, no, you can't be on the praise team. Like, yeah, it was very strange. I remember I went, there was one Sunday where we all went to church, and then after I went to a movie with my friend, and my sister came to pick me up for the movie, and I was like, what is happening right now? Jesse never comes to pick me up, or she
Yeah.
did sometimes, but like I was expecting my parents. And Jesse just kind of sits in the car with me, and she's like, Mom and Dad have something to tell you. And I was like, okay. Jessie is my older sister, by the way. My oldest sister was at college at the time.
Okay. Okay. I've met Jess.
Yes, you have
She's
met Jessie.
yeah, amazing.
um, so we're sitting in the car, and I'm like, "What is it?" And she drops my friend off. She's like, "I don't want to tell you. I think Mom and Dad should." And I'm sitting there like, "Did someone die? Like,
Right. What
what's
the
going
hell?
on?"
Right.
Um, no one died, thankfully.
Okay, good. Good.
But it kind of felt a little bit like that because we actually got home, and I remember walking in the front door, and my mom, her face was puffy, like she was crying, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, is grandma okay? Like, what is going on? And at some point my dad looks at my sister and he's like, hey, why don't you go get some milk? We really need some milk. And so we leave the house again. Like, my sister takes me and we leave the house to go get milk. Like completely erroneous errand,
Hmm. Hmm.
because my parents had to deal and like try to figure out how they were feeling about what had just happened. But basically, we walk back in, we come home with this giant jug of milk. And we have to sit down in the front room. And I'm like sitting across from my parents, and my dad has to, like, just in a, I can tell he's broken up about it. It was one of the second times in my life that it was the second time in my life that I'd ever seen my dad cry. The first time was when he told me I had to stop reading Harry Potter because the
Oh.
church was mad about it.
Mm.
Obviously that didn't happen. He was like, I was a minister's kid. I know the stress that you're under. Like, you're being watched all the time. You can keep reading it, but you have to keep it a secret. Like, he's
Got
such a
it.
good dad. Like,
Yeah.
like I love my dad. But at this point, like, he was trying not to cry, but he was definitely crying, and he was like, as of this afternoon, my the I am no longer employed at the, I don't care. I'm no longer employed at the Bettendorf Christian Church. I'm gonna put them on blast because they're awful.
Oh,
Uh
okay. Okay.
Basically, like, it was just the weirdest thing. So it's a non-denominational Christian church. So
Okay.
we're not, we don't follow any of the like Catholic tradition. We're not like super super traditional, but we're sitting there, and all of, like, after this conversation happened, everything just kind of was laid out for us. We're not allowed to talk to anybody that's back at the church. No one at the church is allowed to like talk to us, or if they do, they're like, it's a whole politicky, like, weird thing that's going to happen. Like, they're going to be excommunicated or whatever. It
What?
was Church politics are probably the most cutthroat, awful, awful thing that you could ever be involved in, including like regular, well, now government politics, I feel like, are basically church politics. So that's fun.
Wow.
But it was bad. It was like all of the friends, and again, I'm 12 or 13 at this time.
Yeah.
Like, all of my friends were made through church. This was my entire identity. I would be at church almost every single day. I was there for youth group. I was there just to hang out with my dad. Like, I would be there, and now I had nowhere to go. I didn't know what to do. I was like, what am I, who even am I? Like, and to be that young and to have
Yeah.
such an existential crisis, like it was the weirdest thing. And so I kept reading. I was like there were some really tense moments during that entire conversation where I remember my mom was not in a good state, and she basically blamed the whole thing on me, which sucks. But she had the same thing happen to her. Her entire existence was pulled out from under her, and she'd been living this existence much longer than I had. And she didn't know who she was anymore, and she lashed out in ways that probably weren't very healthy for me at the time,
Yeah.
and definitely weren't healthy for her at the time. And I don't think she's really gotten over kind of all of that that's happened. Um, but yeah, it was a huge moment for our family because my oldest sister again was out of college. Eventually, she came home because she was going to college in Missouri. She came home.
Hmm.
My older sister Jessie went to a year at college, but knew that she was more needed at home. We spent months. Like my dad almost quit being a minister. He took up a job as a ACT prep course teacher,
Nice.
and he
Okay.
actually got into like teaching for the first time. But he was traveling up and down the Midwest for months, just like filling it, like making sure that we had money as a family, and trying to like heal himself, I'm sure, a little bit on the road as well. So it was a huge moment for our entire family. Elijah, my little brother, he thankfully, I think, kind of got spared from some of it. Like he, of course, had to deal with a lot of the backlash.
Sure.
And like again, he had friends at church. He's 4 years younger than me. Question mark? Am I a bad sister? But yeah, it was a really tumultuous time. And all of us have dealt with it in our own ways. And it's really interesting when I hang out with my older sisters because we'll talk about those times in our lives sometimes, and it's so interesting the way that all of us dealt with it in different ways, and all of us had different experiences, but it was the same thing that happened to all of us. um but yeah, so eventually my dad did decide that he was going to go back into ministry after teaching these ACT prep courses. And he went to interview at a couple different churches. I remember we were up for a gig in Arizona. I think we actually had something here in Seattle. And then there was a church in Colorado that really liked him as well. And so he kind of had his pick. Um, and he ended up choosing Colorado. And so we packed up our entire house and we drove from Iowa to Aurora, Colorado.
Hmm.
Um, and we ran into many tornadoes on the way.
Oh
Uh,
my goodness.
and that was like a staple for any of our summer trips. We would always see tornadoes as we were driving. So I'm not afraid of tornadoes. I go chasing them. They're fun. But
I don't want to derail us, but I do have something about tornadoes later on. Okay, keep going, keep going.
we'll
Okay, this
circle
is
back
okay.
around.
So knowing that it's almost like that's your tipping point. 13 years old, your understanding, creativity when it comes down to Harry Potter, loving it, and the fact that the church doesn't understand, doesn't agree, whatever the case may be. We have similar stories when it comes to magic, if you will.
Yeah.
So you get this, and now going to Colorado, and now your dad's back in ministry. Like, how does that look for you? Do what am I trying to say? I'm the question I'm trying to ask is, how did
My relationship with
this
the church.
event hinder or grow you when it comes to church?
Yeah. Um, I think so. I currently don't attend church.
Okay.
I don't like church. I think it is. I can't say a generalized statement because it's not full of fake people, but there are a lot of fake people in church.
I got you. Yeah.
And like as far as a relationship with God, like I do believe in God. I have a personal relationship that I like. If people are willing to talk about it, then I'll talk about it with them.
Right.
But I no longer take the opportunity to be like, what's your relationship with God? And like
Yeah.
throw the
Yeah.
Bible at their face.
Yeah.
Um and that's I it does spawn from this, but I think I was reading a couple books just about like psychology and like how we grow as humans. And there was, I think actually this is from an article where someone was talking about when there's a traumatic event in your history, you're growing, especially if it's in your development as a child, your growing
Right.
stops. Like your mental development is paused for a little bit because you've got to figure out how to deal with the trauma versus how to like be an actual human. And so it's really interesting because like I went through high school, my I can't even say church, but like my creativity, the friends that I made, I did not step away from Harry Potter. I was like, this might have been the cause of everything, but I'm holding on even
I'm
tighter.
in it to win it. Yep.
I
Yep.
I made all of my friends through Harry Potter Club. I started getting into theater.
Hmm.
I like these were the ways that I could outlet a lot of what that trauma was as a kid without really kind of going back and delving into it. um and so like the Harry Potter club that I was in, we would talk about Harry Potter, but we would write fan fiction and we would draw. And it was the first time that I really got into drawing um,
Mm.
and creating like really well done, deep stories about characters, not just like if I could be a character. And it was really great. And a lot of those friends that I made, I'm still friends with to this day. We
Oh,
of
I love
course like
that.
you know how girl breakups are. Like we had
Yes.
our girl breakup at one point. Like
Hmm.
we had
Hmm.
a really bad fight and then we like we're not ever going to be the same friends that we were, but like those girls that I know, like we're always going to know one another,
Yeah.
right? And it's just it was a really interesting time to kind of grow alongside with what this trauma had done with to our family. And to, like I still had to go to church. Like I was still a minister's daughter in Colorado, so I
Wow.
had to go to church every Sunday. I was not allowed to miss it. I made friends at church when there was an actual like young population there. Of course, like if we were to look at churches across the United States right now, we see that a lot of their age their like the population and their demographics are getting much older because a lot of younger people don't want to be involved in the kind of two-faced
Yeah.
two-sidedness of what church represents at this point. And so that's I had to do that while I was in high school, and then I went to college and I had two options for college. I had more options, but like in my brain I
Hmm.
had
Hmm.
two options for college. I was going to go up to UNC, which was the University of Northern Colorado,
Hmm.
where a lot of my friends from school were going, like lots of people. And everybody, like, there were a lot of theater kids who were going up there. It was actually a good theater school, but it wasn't like great. I actually didn't even end up going to a great theater school. But I could go up there and I was like, everybody who's going up there is just staying in Colorado and that's all they're doing and that's all they're going to do with their lives. And I'm like, I want to do something big. And I like, I
Mm.
have always been a little bit ambitious.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I was like, I have to go to California. I have to go to California to become an actress. Otherwise, like, I'm never going to make it anywhere. And I'm doing theater. Like, why didn't I go to New York? I'm done. But
Hey, it's okay. We learn as we go. We learn as we go.
part of but ironically like part of me being so decisive about where I have to go and like working with limited information was a lot of what had happened with the church in Iowa,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I sat there with very limited information and I had to make decisions. Like I had to figure out how I was going to move forward and how I was going to ignore all the kids at school who went to that same church and were now like bullies to me.
Hmm.
Like they made fun of me, they would trip me up in the hallways. Like there were instances where I was like, I don't even know if I should be at school right now. Like I had to start making choices and I had to be very decisive and very judgmental for myself about what those choices were. And those are things that now as an adult in my mid 30s,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here like, oh god, I was a little dumbass.
It's reflection
But
time.
I
It's
understand
reflection
like where
time.
it came from now too, which is
Yeah.
kind of nice. But yeah, so I my cousins actually on my dad's side, I had four cousins on my dad's side, and two of them went to Azusa Pacific University, and I ended up going out there. They had already graduated by the time I started going there. Um, but I like this was it was like the theater department barely existed. I think it was like maybe 3 to 5 years old when I first got there.
Oh, super new. Okay.
Yeah, super new.
Hmm.
While I was there, they built a black box theater. Like we did some really great shows, and I got to when I was in high school and doing theater, I always wanted to do a little bit on the tech side
Okay.
because I was like, ooh, this interests me. And the tech director was like, no, we need you more on stage more. And he was like trying to be complimentary about it, but he was like, no, you are dumb. Probably not that, but
Wait.
it's like he just didn't want me back there, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Plus I was afraid of heights, so I wouldn't be able to hang lights in like it was a beautiful theater that we had in high school. I get to college, and now like I have the opportunity to start designing sets, and I have the opportunity to start like building and painting and working with saws, and I was like, this is great. I get
Yeah. Yeah.
to make things. um yeah, so I just the community that was around me at the time, it was a Christian university.
Hmm.
And so my the friends that I made, I considered that church because we were talking about God and we were exploring God and we were required to go to chapel three times a week. And
Oh,
like that
wow.
was it was an okay environment to be in, but it was still a bubble. It still like kept me with limited information. And so I made decisions in that space with limited information that I like now as a grown adult, I sit and I look back and I'm like, how interesting that I made those choices. And so yeah, so that's been kind of the common theme that I've been going through with these last couple of years in my adulthood is identifying like when I do have that limited information, how many more questions can I ask so that I can try to make better decisions?
Right.
Um, but the other common thread has been like when I'm stressed, when I'm scared, when I am so fed up with the ignorant things that I encounter in my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
I will sit down and I will draw things, or I will sit down and I will start writing. And when I was in college, with my little limited bubble, I was drawing and I was writing and I was doing a lot of that stuff. And I turned to a couple of my friends, and by a couple, I mean 12 of them. Um,
Nice.
bringing the
Nice.
disciples now. Ooh, bad joke. But I turned to my friends and I was like, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And do you want to be a villain or a hero?
Mm.
And like it turned into this, like I drew all of these people. Like I would even have people request that I draw them as a superhero that I didn't know very well. And it started just happening. And so I would draw people as a superhero, and I would like give them powers and I would work them into the story. And I came up with Electio, while I was, I think, a junior. No, it had to have been earlier than that. I was in college at some point.
I love it. Okay.
And Electio is this book that kind of took from all of these little pieces of my life, and as I've grown it's also evolved. But it's basically based on this question that we have around like what do we do with limited information?
Mm.
What beliefs that do we have that are based off of myth, that are based off of just things, that stories that are ingrained in our lives and in our traditions, and then what is real and what is not based off of that, and what can we make real because we believe it so much. And so yeah, so that's kind of what Alexio is now, and it's still in draft mode because I'm afraid of it. But
Let me go back, because when you mentioned that you're afraid of it, I think that's where there are times in your life where you'll be afraid of something, and I was told that if you're frightened about it, lean into it. And I think based on what you've shared and based on your journey, your okay and moment was your dad being dismissed from church and you navigating through that, and then fast forwarding till now, lean into that character, because I think that's your superhero strength, your power of bringing that to the world. Because I know with this situation, you're not alone. There are so many others that have experienced something with people when it comes to church and not living up to those Christian standards.
Yeah.
And that part can either make you or break you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it broke you. I think it made you to where now I'm going to ask additional questions. I'm going to make sure I have all of the information, but I'm going to create my world. I'm
Yeah.
going to create my world that I feel comfortable with, because the other stuff that I've been exposed to it's a for me. That's what it is. So Bree, when it comes down to in draft mode, what scares you about releasing?
Oh, there are a couple different things. I think the main thing that I'm struggling with right now is whether it's even any good. I've had a couple people read it, and like they'll tell me it's good, but they're not like professionals in the book industry, you
Yeah.
know? And then I sit there and I'm like, I don't know if I'm getting like if this so I look at this whole this book is a planned series. It is a
Mm-hmm.
planned 5-part series. It used to be 4 parts, it's now 5. And it is expansive. Like it's taking in world mythology from everywhere. Originally, I was only focused on Greek mythology, and then I was like, that's white supremacy whispering in my ear.
Oh
So
God.
why don't we start looking at why don't we start looking at actual like native mythology? Why don't we start looking at like Native American? Why don't we start looking at like any of like Persian mythology, any Chinese or Japanese or Indian mythology? Like all of this stuff has started to kind of coalesce into like even Central America and our and like any like Mesoamerica, like any of that. Like I'm tying into the themes of this book. But it's not like I talk about it and it feels heavy for me, but it's not meant to be told in such a heavy way.
That's
Like
fair.
it's a superhero book. Like it's supposed to be entertaining and it's supposed to have you ask questions. But I think the book that changed a lot of how I look at like hero stories for me was actually the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson.
Okay.
He actually, it's my understanding that he wrote that series with just one question: what if the hero doesn't succeed? And it is bone chillingly good. Highly recommended. Anything by Brandon Sanderson, really. But I like that's what got me into this idea. Like, what if the character's wrong? Like, what if the main character has all of these beliefs and has all of these ideas about how the world should work, and then she keeps being told things by people who end up being a villain in the story. But then what if like what they're telling her is actually right? Like what if
Mm.
this is the way that things should be? And so yeah, so it's kind of like it's very much a white woman's journey to wokeness.
God.
But it's like there are still people who are like little evangelical Brie who believe very staunchly that gay people are going to hell, and that that no one else can possibly be as close to God as people who aren't reading the Bible every day. Like there's like that was who I was when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and now like I I'm gonna say this on your podcast for the first time. Like, I don't even think you know this. I'm bi. Like, I'm a part of the LGBTQA community. I have not made it very public because of my past and because of I like it's really funny because every time I go home, my mom asks me like, "So have you met a boy?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Have you met a girl?" In like terror.
Oh my goodness.
She's so scared that I'm gonna be lesbian, and I'm like, I'm bi, but she doesn't need to know that. She might listen to this at some point, but but that's the thing is like I grew up with this fear of being who I was, and
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, I've been able to like tear apart a lot of your face is gonna make me cry right now.
I'm like, I'm I'm just, I thank you for sharing it. I know that for you to be whole and just to share like that is just incredible.
Yeah.
And I know with your journey, that's been when, you know, when you share it, but then knowing like Bree is finding herself.
Yeah.
All of herself, not just pieces, but all of herself. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's been a good time. I've been attending therapy and, trying
Yes.
to make sure that that I'm doing things the right way instead of doing
Mhm.
things my way all the time. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I'm excited to see like what the rest of my adulthood is going to look like. I think like people always talk about how your 30s are when you like come into yourself, and I'm like, God damn, is
Self-discover.
that true?
30s is rough.
Like
I
my
got
my
like
20s were a shit show.
I was like, I thought my 20s was, I'm looking back like, okay, well, maybe because I had limited information. I was reckless in my 20s. Now I'm in my 30s. I'm like, oh, I know that's bad, but so I totally get it. But I want to thank you for not only sharing your okay and moment, but just really just being a constant for me and others. I know we've dealt with a lot. And not even in on a a sad note, but it's just you don't find people in the world that you you don't find a lot of people that you can keep hold of from work or from school or whatever. And throughout this entire life journey, like I keep you and you keep me. So I love you.
Ew.
Thank you for doing this and just being awesome. I know that we are going to celebrate the queen. I have
Yes.
less than a couple of hours to get ready. Where are you seeing her at? And if y'all don't know who
In
we're talking
Seattle.
about Beyonce. Oh, you're seeing her in Seattle.
In Seattle, yeah. I got club seats. I was like,
Oh, snaps.
I'm a little too old at this point to like be on the floor. Like if
Yeah.
you're on the floor, congrats to you. But I don't know if I can handle that. So I'm just
Golly.
gonna be screaming from the club seats, like, yeah, church
That is your I think we found our title. I think we found our title.
church
Yeah.
girl, don't hurt nobody.
Yep. I think that's the title. Well,
That's it.
thank
That's the
y'all.
title.
Thank y'all for listening so much. Tune in next week for another great episode of OK and the podcast. Until then, this is Just Jess. Bree, love you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We'll see y'all
Let's
soon.
talk about sex next time.
We will. We will.